This is an interesting project. I picked this project because of its size. The size of the diagrams will warrant the Jumbo 3 board setup. This is a 15-foot by 35-inch kayak. First I'm going to digitize all the frame members and then I'll do the bottom. I'm using Jumbo Board 1 to digitize the frames. There are 7 frames, so I'm going to digitize each frame, save it as a DXF file, and that'll be ready for cutting later. After I draw each frame, I save that file and then I carry on with the next one. I did do some editing after, because where those notches are, the stringers are 3/4 by 3/4 on the frames, and on the bottom of the frames they're 1 inch by 1 inch. So I made sure that those measurements were corrected using a vector editor. It took a while to trace out and digitize each frame because I had to masking tape the plan on the table and then remove it and put the next one on. I could have masking taped all the plans on all 3 boards and drew it out that way, but I decided to do it on board number 1. It actually just saves me moving around so much because I can just sit down there at the stool and digitize each one, remove the diagram, remasking tape the new diagram down, and carry on each time. All these frame members are going to be cut from 3/4 ply, and I'll be running that through the CNC machine. Almost all the drawing or the tracing, I selected tracing polylines. That just seems to be my favorite, but we could have used any of those selections, lines and arcs, combination, but I like polyline. These frames coming up are a little bit different because they've got circle cutouts. So I used the circle command to do the cutouts, and I corrected each measurement to what I saw on the diagram. The circle selection is kind of slick because you just digitize 3 points and it echoes back the value, the diameter. You correct it if you want and carry on. I like the circle command because it gives you a chance to correct the value and it's extremely accurate. What I'm planning on doing here is once the frames are all drawn up, then I'll turn around and do the bottom, and once that's all drawn up, then I will cut the bottom out with the CNC, and I'll also cut all the frames out, and I'll do a partial assembly. Doing the 15-foot bottom on the Jumbo 3 boards really shows off the usefulness of the Jumbo 3, because the Jumbo 3 can handle 17 feet. And a worthwhile note here is not only can you trace out a paper pattern, but you can also trace out an actual piece that you can just redigitize. It could be a piece of wood, piece of cardboard, or a piece of glass. Shown here is a circle command again. Another point that's worth mentioning is that you can take any diagram, any size, digitize it, and scale it to whatever size you want. This is the last frame member. All the frames are drawn up, so I ran each one through a CAD viewer just to have a look at the quality of the draw. Each one looked good, and I did do a bit of editing to change some of those stringers to make sure that they fit 3/4 by 3/4 or 1 inch by 1 inch. This really shows off the Jumbo 3 for its size. I also did do 2 reference points in case the diagram has to be moved and redrawn. I did end up moving the diagram because I did some of those cross-member traces. And some of the cross-members ended up being in that null area between where the boards are joined. You can see the null area on the diagram on the Logitrace software. You can see here there's 2 null areas, so if there's any cross-members fall on that area, you have to move the diagram and redraw those 2 spots. The program software allows for this. You just move your diagram, re-input those 2 reference points, and draw those spots back in. The cross members here, which are the frames, are going to be 3/4 inch plywood. The kayak bottom here is going to be 1/4 inch mahogany plywood. These are the cross members that I ended up drawing in. And again, I did have to move the diagram about 1.5 feet over to the right to get some of the cross members that were missing because of that null area. Now we're going to set up to do the CNC cut of the bottom in 2 parts. It took 2 4x8 sheets, fastened it down to the slave table, and I'm cutting it with a 1/4 inch end mill. I removed the dust collector so you can see the bit cutting the 1/4 inch mahogany plywood. I also added about 4 tabs to make sure that the sheet didn't move after it was cut right through. It took more time to set it up than it did to cut it. I cut the bow section and then I cut the stern section, 2 separate pieces. I then took these cut pieces back up to the drawing table, laid them on top of the diagram, and marked out the cross members where the frames are going to be attached. I'm now going to get ready to cut the frames out 3/4 inch plywood on the CNC. This is a straightforward cut. I used the same bit, the 1/4 inch end mill, and I'm cutting out each frame. There are about 8 frames to cut out because frame 7 and frame 1 are the same for the stern and the bow. I didn't tab any of the parts because I just nailed it down with finishing nails to keep the panel that I'm cutting in place. And because it was marked with the first pass, I just added nails as required. When it's done, the part just pops right out. First one is done, we're ready to cut the next 6. It's the same process for each frame. Fasten down the 3/4 ply, machine it out, remove the frame, go on to the next one. Frames are all cut and marked. Here I've assembled the bow and the stern pieces, and I added the 1 inch stringer that goes all the way around the perimeter. The frames all attached to the stringers. I'm starting to add all the frames to the stern and the bow. All the upper framing is 3/4 by 3/4 lumber. Everything is screwed and glued. It was amazing how I was able to bend that wood on the frames. Frames are all done, we're ready for the sides. Here you'll see the sides and the bottom are done. It's not that heavy, so it was fairly easy to handle. Well, this is about as far as I'm going to take the assembly. The bottom's done, the sides are done, everything's glued and screwed, It's just a matter now of filling in the top and doing the fiberglassing on the joints.